Now let's just get into a little bit of what jQuery is, what are the critical components of jQuery. One of the core reasons why jQuery is used is because it allows an asynchronous call to the server using a HTTP request. What do I mean by that? Everybody's got fed up of browsers being refreshed every time you change something on the page. So earlier people used XML HTTP request to fire a call, get back the data and populate it on the client side without refreshing the main browser. This now can completely be done using AJAX calls within jQuery. So jQuery completely masks the whole call, and you can just with one simple line of jQuery, believe me, exactly one line, you can call a file from the server, get the data, populate it into a HTML block. Cool, that's right. So that's the basic usage of jQuery in terms of calling and getting data asynchronously from the server. Some of the other things in jQuery we have to understand if you want to just start, get the basics of how to use jQuery is selectors. So jQuery has a concept of selectors, which basically means that whenever you use jQuery, you must always first connect it to one DOM object. So you can either connect it to, let's say, the body of your HTML page, or to a div tag, or to a span tag, or to a table tag. The jQuery always runs within the context of that DOM object. So if you have connected jQuery, as you can see how you connect a jQuery to a div object. If you connect a jQuery to a div object, everything, all the actions, all the functions are in the context of the div object, which actually is a very good idea, because then you're not creating any functions common to the page, and hence there is no conflict whichever happens between this function and any other function somebody else has written. So for example, suppose you wrote a standard function called getText. Now somebody else can also write that function over time, and you would have two functions getText, right, which could potentially conflict. Now if you have defined this function getText against a div object, then the getText only exists within that context of that div, and hence any other function called getText does not conflict with this function. Right. So jQuery has this whole concept of selectors, where you can use tag names, you can use class names, you can use the ID to build a set of DOM controls. Then you can apply a function to that DOM control. So let me give you another example. Suppose you want to animate all the div tags on a page. So you could just write a simple jQuery which selects all the tags which are of type div, and if you just fire the .animate function, it will animate each of these divs. So you don't have to actually loop through them. jQuery will let you run the function to all the controls, all the DOM objects which have got selected because of the selector which you used. Let me give you another example. Suppose you have a particular set of div tags against which you want to animate. So you could put a class called c_animate against all these div tags, and you could just select that class and then do .animate. Again, only the div tags with the class c_animate would be animated, right? So this allows you to keep building a set of selectors, a set of DOM objects, and then run a specific function against this without even writing a for loop. In a normal JavaScript, if you wanted to do this, you would actually write a loop which would fetch you all the div tags of a particular, then you would find the particular class, and then you would finally end up animating, right? The second very interesting thing about jQuery is a concept called chaining. What that means is that every JavaScript, every jQuery call gives back a jQuery object, which can then be chained to another call which also gives you back the new set of jQuery objects. So for example, just to take from the last example, if you have some divs again with cAnimate, and you have some spans with cAnimate class, you could first select all the div objects, then do a add and add these span objects to this set. The resultant would be a set of div tags with class c_animate plus a set of span objects with c_animate, and then you could just fire the dot animate. It will animate both the divs and the spans. So you can keep putting controls, keep adding controls to a basket, and then run a function at one shot. It will run through all the objects. Similarly, you could do dot animate, which will also incidentally again return back the set of objects which were selected. So you can again do a dot animate. So you could do dot animate, dot animate, dot animate, and all the three animations would be fired against the objects you had selected. So this is what is chaining. So you can fire a string of functions without having to store first in a variable, then fire each of the separate functions separately. Right? So those are some of the cool features of jQuery. The other very interesting feature of jQuery is the ability to loop directly without the complex structure which you normally have in a programming language. So once you have selected some objects, you can just say dot each, and that will loop through all the objects as part of the selector, whatever you have selected. So all you need to do is call the dot each function. Within that, pass a function which you want to run, and jQuery will run that function as many times as you had selected objects. And for each loop, it will give you this object for the current object it is running. Hence, if you notice, whatever I've talked about, the selectors, the looping, the AJAX calls, you will see that the whole idea is to create a compact JavaScript library which allows you to perform actions on DOM objects very fast, very quickly. What is also very interesting is that most of these functions are internally masked to call the correct corresponding JavaScript function depending on the browser you are working with. For example, if you call the .html function against a DOM object and populate it with the HTML content, based on the type of the browser you're using, it might fire .innerHTML or some other function. So that is what I was saying, in the beginning, that most of the browsers, the functions tend to work similarly because jQuery internally masks the original function and it will call the required function based on the browser you are currently working with. This allows you to confidently use jQuery and program without being worried of which browser it is going to run on. So tomorrow, if a new browser comes up, chances are very high that your jQuery will run fine on that platform as long as it supports JavaScript and is more or less HTML5 compliant. So these are some of the basics of jQuery. As I discussed earlier, jQuery has now been extensively used. Google, Yahoo, all the biggies are using jQuery very extensively. So if you whenever you go for a job, and you now create a new web project, chances are very high that you will be using jQuery in your project in some form or other. The biggest advantage which jQuery now has is thousands and thousands of developers have created various controls for jQuery. For example, a simple thing like image sliders, you will at least find 500 different sliders created for jQuery by different developers. So you can actually go through all the sliders, choose the slider which you like, just import the JS file and you're good to go, right? Similarly, you have tools which can make form objects, you have validation objects, you have animators, you have mobile projects which allow touch to be performed with jQuery. People have written all sorts of things for jQuery. In fact, the owners of jQuery have come up with a new project, another project called jQueryUI.com, which gives a standard theme. So many of the controls now use the theme of jQuery UI. So if you're using this theme, automatically all your controls get themed in a particular way. And on jQuery UI, you have something called a theme roller, which allows you to create new themes. So you can just create a custom theme, put it into your, save the CSS file, and include it in your project, and you will get an absolutely new theme, and it will work with most of the controls of jQuery which support this theme roller. jQuery UI itself gives you a lot of plugins, and small applications. So they have a lot of support for dragging objects, for sorting objects, for positioning objects. They have support for accordions, for styling buttons. So they themselves have given a lot of controls which you can just take it out of the box, put it into your application, and they more or less work fine. My past experience has shown that most of the time, if you take jQuery objects, majority of the times they will work as they have been promised, straight away out of the box without too much of effort. And the best part, most of these JS files are very small, 5 KB, 10 KB, 15 KB, and they give you a huge amount of functionality. So I think that's the, I think a broad idea. I hope you've got a broad idea of what jQuery is. Let me just quickly summarize the key points of jQuery so that you can keep that in mind. A, jQuery is a library built on JavaScript to help in faster client-side programming. jQuery is compatible with most browsers, and most of the jQuery tools which have been written are also compatible with most browsers. jQuery has a very good support for AJAX, so you can make asynchronous calls to the clients. It works on specific DOM objects which you can select and then do actions against a set of objects. It allows you to loop through various objects. And lastly, a lot of developers have created a large number of objects for jQuery which can be plugged and played within your application without too much of effort. Right. I think that sums it up. Great. If you want to read more about jQuery, just go to jQuery.com, or if you want some basic controls, start with jQueryui.com. That concludes my session, a small session on jQuery. This is Vikas Kumar, and I have done extensive development on jQuery and .NET platforms.